Hello, my name is Kevin Towles, and this is my digital platform to vlog on the scavenger hunt assignment that I had to do for my Masters of Arts Communication Fluency class. So let's just dive in, and I will guide you through a literature review on one of my favorite pastimes. Video games, they're fun, they're for everyone, depending on your age, and you can easily just waste hours and hours on them. But they can also be violent. Video games have been getting the heat for a lot of mass shootings and mass acts of violence from leaders like politicians, your representative senators, and even the president. But do they really cause someone to go out and just perform an act of atrocity? That's what I aim to find out with this literature review, because from Columbine in 1999 to El Paso and Dayton in 2019, a lot of people have played video games. And so the literature review that I chose for this topic was How Video Games Communicate Violence. It's featured in Communication Monographs, Volume 81, Number 3, in September of 2014. So this is fairly recent. It's gone through all of the tests and arguments and conversations that happened in the late 90s and early millennia. But before we begin, I need to stress that this literature review does not reference any real life act of violence. So nothing will be discussed on Sandy Hook or Columbine or anything that happened since then. Only specifically how video games can communicate violence. Now, this literature review focuses on FPS games and what is FPS? It means frames per second, and that's the technical term. But when someone's talking about this kind of game, they're talking about the modern games that play in real time. You can easily forget reality and just jump into whatever the story is that's playing out in front of you, because it kind of more or less plays out like a movie. And there are three focal points that this literature review touches on, and the first one is distortion of consequences. There's little to no punishment for committing an act of mass violence, as you can see in Grand Theft Auto 5, which is rated M for mature people 18 and up. A lot of your missions include killing someone, and that someone is usually cops or friend or civilians, and that's kind of how you win the game here. And to most people, going out and doing this kind of stuff is, unforgivable. You know, People wouldn't dare do this, but in this game, that's your livelihood, and you win the game by beating up the bad guy, and which in this example is the police. So there is a real big distortion of consequences. You get fanfare for doing these acts of violence. You level up and all of this other reward system kind of things, and the biggest and the most notorious trope is superheroes. They do a lot of vigilante justice and don't get punished for it. If I go out and I basically beat up someone who is mugging another person, I'm gonna face some charges for that, and that kind of consequence is not in video games at all. Dehumanization of the bad guy. These bad guys get equated to things like monsters and soulless creatures who don't deserve mercy, and the end game is to make you feel good about beating them up. So at the end of the game, players don't really view uh, whoever the big bad was as someone who deserves to be treated as an equal. And the third, and probably the most damaging in my mind, is moral justification of these acts of violence. As I said, there's a reward system for it. There's fanfare and achievements. If you're playing PS4 or Xbox, you're regarded as the hero. It's a callback to distortion of consequences, and you're fighting for the greater good. These human characters that are equated to soulless creatures. it tell these games tell you, beat them up, kill them. It's the only way to prevent them for, committing their evil further. And at the end of the day, you are justified in committing an act of violence yourself. So, in conclusion, are violent video games the definitive reason behind acts of mass violence? More research is needed. You need to look at the specific act of violence that we're talking about, whether it's Columbine, Sandy Hook, or El Paso, or Dayton, Ohio. And it's just, so complex that it's mostly dependent on the individual. But besides that, can violent video games influence acts of mass violence? This literature review says yes. And how to put it to a stop? Parents, pay attention to what you're buying your kids in the video game store. I frequent video game stores a lot, and I have often seen a child 12, 13, and 14 pick up Grand Theft Auto 5 in particular, and games like it, and say, "Mommy, Daddy, I want this game." And parents just look at it and, they think just because video games are aimed at all kids that, any video game they want is fine, and that is not the truth. Again, video games are an entertainment forum, just like movies and TV shows. Some are perfect for children, and others are aimed at adults only, and that just needs to be what parents need to keep in mind when they're buying their children video games. So thank you for watching. This was my vlog on video games and how the violence in them communicate violence. And if you're one of my friends watching this, I know you don't think that video games have anything to do with violence. So I apologize for kind of taking a side with this. But the evidence speaks for itself. Thank you.